Imagine coming home after a long shift. You unlock your door, you expect to find your roommate asleep. Maybe you even think, finally, let me just rest. But then you notice something. The room is too quiet. The bed looks strange. And as you get closer, you realize the person lying there is not sleeping. She's dead. Her name was Anne Muthoni Ngunjiri. She was 23 years old, and according to police, the man they identified as the prime suspect was someone she knew intimately, her boyfriend, a serving GSU officer. By the time Anne's body was discovered in her Mihango home, that man was gone. And the question started immediately: what happened behind that locked door? Why was Anne alone with the man her family says had already shown signs of violence? And perhaps the biggest question of all, if there were warning signs before that night, why didn't they stop what happened next? Now this is the story of Anne Muthoni Ngunjiri, and this is Crime Dopers, where crime meets truth.
Twisted tales in every folder. Truth runs hot while the trail gets colder. Crime Dopers, we don't look away.
Hey Crime Dopers, welcome back. I'm Anja, and today we are talking about a case that is difficult for one very simple reason. There was nothing extraordinary about the setting. No remote forest, no abandoned building, no mysterious stranger wandering into town. This happened in a home in Mihango, Kayole, a place where people live close to one another, where neighbors know each other's routines, where gates open and close, where people come home from work, where life is happening all around you. And yet inside one of those houses, a 23-year-old woman will lose her life. Anne Muthoni Ngunjiri was the last-born child in her family. She had moved to Nairobi looking for opportunities and trying to build her future. Her family describes a young woman with plans ahead of her, but her relationship with the man police will later identify as the prime suspect had reportedly become troubled. There were allegations of previous violence. There were reports of pressure to get married. And by the beginning of February 2026, that relationship had become the backdrop to a death that shocked her family. The publicly reported timeline places the killing on Sunday, February 1st, 2026. The following day, Anne's roommate returned home after a 24-hour shift and discovered her body. And a few days later, a post-mortem examination gave investigators an important piece of the puzzle. Anne had died from severe head injuries involving both a sharp object and blunt force trauma. But knowing how someone died is not the same as knowing every detail of why, and that is where this story begins.
Niko na uchungu na mtoto wangu hawezi rudi hata akishikwa hata auawe. Mtoto wangu hawezi rudi, sitaona Muthoni tena. Hiyo maisha yake imeisha hivyo. 23 years, mtoto mdogo, mtoto mwenye anati. Mtoto wangu hawezi rudi no more. Nimeluzi mtoto mdogo. Na nimeluzi mtoto alikuwa na maono ya kwenda mbali.
Before we talk about the crime scene, I want us to talk about Anne. Because sometimes in true crime, we get tempted to jump straight into the violence, the blood, the weapon, the suspect, the autopsy. And we forget that the person at the center of all this had an entire life. Anne was 23. She was the last-born child of her mother, Wanjiku. And according to family accounts, she had come to Nairobi to look for better opportunities. She was building, trying, figuring things out, just like so many young Kenyans in Nairobi. You know that stage of life, you're trying to make rent, trying to find work, trying to make something of yourself, trying to understand relationships, trying to decide what kind of life you actually want. And according to reports from people close to Anne, her relationship with Benson Mutiso had become increasingly difficult. He was reportedly an on and off boyfriend. And the phrase on and off can sound harmless, like normal relationship drama, break up, get back together, argue, make up, but family and friends described something more serious. They alleged there had been violence. They alleged that Mutiso had assaulted Anne before. They also alleged that he had damaged or destroyed some of her property. And then there was the marriage. According to Anne's mother, Mutiso was pressuring Anne to get married. Anne, however, was reportedly hesitant. I mean, she was only 23, she wanted more time. And that disagreement, according to her family, had become one of the major sources of tension between them. Now, we need to be careful here. These are allegations reported by family and people close to Anne. They're important because they help us understand the relationship, but they're not the same thing as findings made by a court. And that's a distinction we're going to maintain throughout this episode, because there is a human temptation, especially in a case this emotional, to connect every piece of information and create one neat story. But investigations aren't supposed to work that way. Evidence has to support the story, not the other way around. Still, one thing is difficult to ignore. If those reports of previous violence are accurate, Anne's final night did not happen in a vacuum. There may have been a history behind it. And that brings us to the question we need to keep asking. Was the final night a sudden explosion of violence, or was it the end of a much longer pattern? It is the early hours of Sunday, February 1st, 2026. Anne and Mutiso had apparently been out. Neighbors later reported seeing the two return to their apartment. At one point, a neighbor helped them get through the residential gate. And think about how ordinary that sounds. Someone opens the gate, two people walk in, maybe somebody notices them, maybe somebody doesn't. Then they enter their apartment and the door closes. That is one of the most haunting things about cases like this. That last ordinary moment often looks completely ordinary. There's no soundtrack, no warning. Nobody says, this is the last time you'll see her alive. Life just continues. Inside the apartment, however, an argument reportedly began. The exact details of what triggered the confrontation remain unclear. Some reports mention relationship tensions. Other accounts have referred to jealousy and a possible love triangle. Those details have circulated in reporting, but I will not present them as established facts. What the investigation does have to establish is what happened next, because sometime after the two entered that apartment, Anne was fatally assaulted. Police later said she suffered severe head injuries from a combination of sharp object and blunt force trauma. A knife was reportedly recovered from the scene, and when neighbors looked back at that night, there was another disturbing detail. They had not heard screams or cries for help. Now, ask yourself, how does violence happen in a residential compound without the entire neighborhood knowing? Was the attack sudden? Was Anne incapacitated quickly? Was there something preventing her from calling for help? Those are investigative questions. We should not pretend we know the answer just because silence was reported, but the silence bit really matters because it's part of the timeline, yeah? And then comes what happened after Anne died. According to reports, the apartment was locked. The keys were reportedly returned to their usual location, and the suspect, poof, disappeared. Anne remained inside, alone, until Monday.
Kumaanisha ya kwamba kuna kitu alipewa ama kuna nguvu ilitumika ndio aweze kumuua, because hiyo ni kitendo ya unyama amefanya. And I thought msichana wangu alikuwa amekataa kuolewa na yeye, lakini yeye alikuwa anamsukumia tu amuoe. Na kumfuata kwa nyumba hakuna mayowe ilisikika wenye wanasema, akamuua venye wanasema, alafu akaenda akaweka funguo tu mahali wanaekanga, yeye akafunga nyumba na akaenda.
Monday, February 2nd. Anne's roommate, identified in reporting as Lucia Wamboi, returned home after working a 24-hour shift. Think about that for a second. She had been away doing her job, probably thinking about getting home, changing clothes, eating something, sleeping. Normal things. I mean, she arrives, she finds the keys where they're usually kept, she unlocks the door, and according to reports, she initially believed Anne was asleep. Then she looked closer, then everything changed. The reports describe Anne's body being found in or under the bed. There was extensive blood. A towel had reportedly been placed over her face. The room was no longer a home. It was a crime scene. And somewhere in that room was the beginning of the answer investigators needed. A weapon, blood evidence, clothing, the condition of the scene, the location of the body, the state of the apartment. All of those things became pieces of a puzzle. But here's the thing with forensic evidence. A crime scene doesn't speak in one clear sentence. It speaks in fragments. A fingerprint may tell you someone touched something. A blood pattern may tell you something about movement. A phone can tell you where a person was communicating. A witness can tell you what they saw. And the job of investigators is to put those fragments together. Not force them together, actually make them fit. According to media reports, police recovered a bloodied knife at the scene. The Star also reported a significant wound around Anne's left eye and blood around her mouth. Those are deeply disturbing details, but they matter because they show the violence was not simply a vague domestic argument. Something catastrophic had happened inside that room. And now the investigators had another problem. The person they wanted to question was missing. The name police gave reporters was Benson Mutiso. Some records and social media reports have also referred to him as Benson Mutiso. He was reported to be a serving General Service Unit officer attached to the Embakasi Training School. And now we reach a detail that honestly deserves much more attention. According to police, Mutiso had already been away from his duties. He was reportedly AWOL, away without official leave, for somewhere between 10 to 20 days. That is not a small detail because imagine the timeline. A serving officer is reportedly absent from duty. Then a young woman he's alleged to have been in a relationship with is found murdered, and the same officer becomes the prime suspect. Now ask yourself, who knew he was missing? When did they know? What procedures were followed? Was anyone looking for him before Anne died? Those are not accusations, those are accountability questions, because when someone serves in a disciplined security institution, there are systems, right? There are reporting structures, there are supervisors, there are records. There are people whose job is to know whether officers are where they're supposed to be. And according to the police statement reported at the time, Mutiso had been absent for days before the murder. That creates a question bigger than one man. It raises a question about institutions. Did the system fail to notice, or did it notice and fail to act? We cannot answer that from the public record available to us, but the question deserves to be investigated. Once Anne's body was discovered, the search began. Police publicly identified Mutiso as a person of interest and said they were pursuing him. Kayole Police Commander Joseph Owoth said investigators were at an advanced stage and that the suspect had been identified. The message to the public was essentially they were looking for him, they expected to arrest him, but he was not there. And that changes the shape of a murder investigation because now investigators are dealing with two mysteries. What happened to Anne? And where is the man they believed may know what had happened? A suspect disappearing does not by itself prove guilt. That's important, but a person who is wanted for questioning has rights. A person accused of a crime has rights. A court must eventually determine guilt. But from an investigative perspective, a missing suspect creates urgency. You need to establish movement. You need communication records. You need financial activity. You need transport links. You need people who may have helped. You need CCTV where available. You need to know where the suspect was before the incident, after the incident, and in the hours that followed. And in this case, the fact that he was reportedly a trained GSU officer makes the manhunt even more significant. Because investigators were not searching for a random stranger whose movements were completely unknown. They were reportedly looking for someone trained within the security system itself. While police were searching, Anne's family was doing something much more painful. They were planning a funeral. Her mother had lost her lastborn daughter, and no matter what the investigation eventually finds, that is something no arrest can undo. No courtroom can undo it. No sentence can undo it. You can deliver justice, yes, but you cannot reverse death, Anne's body was eventually taken toward Nakuru County for burial. The family will lay her to rest in Subukia. And while they prepared to say goodbye, they were also demanding answers. They wanted the person they believed was responsible arrested. They wanted accountability. And they wanted to know why the process appeared from their perspective to be taking so long. That frustration comes through strongly in family interviews. A mother reportedly said she had lost a daughter who had a vision of going far. Think about that phrase, a vision of going far. At 23, your life is still mostly ahead of you, and suddenly, all those possibilities are just gone.
Which we have found that he was one of the staff at GSU training school, but he has absconded duty for the last either 10 or 20 days. So we are looking for this person. Details we may not give.
Now, crime dopers, this is where I want us to slow down, okay? Because when people hear this case, they may remember only three things: a young woman, a GSU officer, a murder in Mihango. But there are details underneath those headlines that deserve our attention. Detail number 1. The relationship was reportedly on and off. That matters because it means there were periods when the relationship ended and periods when it resumed. And that cycle can sometimes make outsiders underestimate the seriousness of what is happening. People think, see what I resolved to. They'll sort it out. I mean, ni relationship issues. But when there are allegations of violence, the language needs to change. It is no longer just relationship drama. It becomes a safety concern. Detail number 2. Alleged previous violence. Family and friends reportedly described previous incidents involving assault and property destruction. Again, those are just allegations, but if they are accurate, then Anne's death may not have come from nowhere, The warning signs may have already existed, and this raises one of the hardest questions in cases involving intimate partner violence. How many warning signs do we overlook because we don't want to interfere in someone's relationship? Detail number 3. Pressure to marry. According to Anne's mother, Mutiso wanted marriage sooner than Anne did. That by itself is not a crime. People can disagree over marriage, but when pressure becomes coercion, intimidation, or control, the situation changes. Anne was reportedly hesitant. She wanted time, and her mother believed that disagreement had become part of the conflict between them. Detail number 4. The officer was reportedly already AWOL. This may be one of the most important institutional questions in the entire case. According to police, he had been away without official leave for somewhere between 10 to 20 days. So the question is, what happened during those days? Where was he? Who had seen him? What did his unit know? Was there documentation? Was there an effort to find him? Because if someone leaves a disciplined security post for an extended period, that should not become invincible. Detail number 5. The locked house. Reports say the door was locked after the killing, right? The keys were reportedly returned to their usual, I want us to be careful here, usual hiding place. That detail matters because it potentially explains why the body was not found immediately. To someone outside the home, there may have been no obvious reason to think that Anne was dead inside, and that means a decision allegedly made after the killing had consequences for when the crime was discovered. Detail number 6. The autopsy. This is where the speculation needs to stop because the post-mortem provided a medical answer. The reported cause of death was severe head injury involving a combination of a sharp object and blunt force trauma. The autopsy does not tell us every emotional detail of that night. It does, however, establish that Anne died from serious physical trauma, and that becomes part of the evidence investigators will use. Now, here's the part that makes this case especially frustrating. There are still important things we don't publicly know. What exactly happened during the argument? Was there a confrontation before Anne and Mutiso reached the apartment? What happened inside during those final minutes? What forensic evidence was recovered from the scene beyond the publicly reported weapon? What did phone records show? What did neighbors see or hear? Were there CCTV cameras in the area? Was there a confirmed route taken by the suspect after leaving Mihango? Were there people who helped him? Did he seek shelter somewhere? Was there evidence of planning, or did the violence escalate so suddenly? These questions belong to investigators, and eventually, if charges are brought, they belong in court. But until then, we shouldn't fill those gaps with internet theories. We should leave them as that, gaps. Because saying we don't know yet is sometimes the most honest part of true crime. Imagine being Anne's mother. You've buried your daughter. You know police have named the man they suspect. You hear that they're still searching for him. You hear words like investigations are ongoing. The matter is at an advanced stage. We're looking for him. But what you want is very simple. You want justice for your daughter, and you want the person accused of taking her life to stand before a court. Not on Facebook, not on TikTok, not in rumors, in court, where evidence can be tested, where witnesses can testify, where defense lawyers can challenge the prosecution, where a judge can ultimately determine what the evidence proves. That is what justice is supposed to look like. Now, I want to make something very clear here because this is Crime Dopers. The facts really do matter. Public reporting identified Benson Mutiso as a prime suspect in Anne's death. Police said they were looking for him. The case was described as an active investigation, and records from Missing Voices continue to list Anne's case and identify her as a 23-year-old woman who died in Nairobi on February 1st, 2026. However, I have not found a reliable public record confirming a later arrest, arraignment, conviction, or acquittal in this specific case. So, as we tell this story, we are not calling Mutiso a convicted murderer. We're talking about an alleged suspect in an unresolved murder investigation. That distinction is important, yeah? And it is fair to Anne too, because justice should be based on evidence, not assumptions. But this story is about more than just one apartment, more than one relationship, more than one suspect, because there is a national conversation here. A conversation about violence against women, about coercive relationships, about controlling behavior, about whether friends and family know what is happening behind closed doors, about whether people are afraid to interfere, and about what happens when the person accused of violence is someone connected to a powerful institution. We have to be able to hold two truths at once. One, a suspect is entitled to due process, and two, a victim's family is entitled to a serious, independent investigation. Those things are not opposites. They're the foundation of justice. So, Crime Dopers, here's today's life rule, and I want us all to remember this one. If a relationship becomes controlling, violent, threatening, or frightening, don't wait for the violence to become deadly before treating it seriously. Check on your friend, call your sister, talk to your brother. Listen when somebody says they don't feel safe. And don't dismiss repeated violence as, wale si wako kwa mapenzi tu, relationship issues, wataelewana. Because sometimes people don't. Sometimes there's no next apology, there's no next morning, there's no second chance. And for this particular case, if you have credible information that could help investigators locate the person wanted in connection with Anne's death, take that information to the authorities rather than turning it into social media speculation. And if you or someone you know is experiencing gender-based violence in Kenya, support is available through the National GBV helpline 1195. For families dealing with allegations involving police officers, independent oversight mechanisms such as IPOA can also be relevant. The goal is not internet justice, the goal is justice that can stand in court. Anne Muthoni Ngunjiri was 23 years old. She was someone's daughter, someone's sister, someone's friend, someone who came to Nairobi looking for a future, and that future ended inside an apartment in Mihango. The police said they were looking for a GSU officer they identified as a prime suspect. Her family waited. Her mother buried her last-born daughter. And the questions remained. What exactly happened inside that apartment? What happened in those final minutes? Could the warning signs have been recognized earlier? And perhaps the question that goes beyond this case. How many times do we need to hear the warning signs before we decide now they're serious? Because Anne's story shouldn't only make us ask who is responsible. It should make us ask what we as a community can do before another family has to stand beside a coffin asking for justice. I'm Wanja. This is Crime Dopers, where crime meets truth. And until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and please look out for each other. If this story touched you, don't just scroll past it. Share Anne's story responsibly. Keep the conversation going, and remember, a warning sign ignored today can become a tragedy tomorrow.
Crime Dopers. We don't look away.